Welcome to Tokyo Game Life, a Tokyo-based video game podcast focusing on Nintendo and gaming culture in Japan's capital. Your host Mono here to bring you a slice of gaming life from Tokyo. Joshua from the podcast Nintendo Maniacs joins as we chat about Pokemon Legends ZA. We explore everything about this ambitious new title and take a final look at the Pokemon games of the Switch era. Plus, we also take a look at another Game Freak game, Mario and Wario. In the future, we're keeping it Pokemon as I look at the recently released Japanese Pokemon field guide, Pokecology. Let's get into the games with Joshua from Nintendo Maniacs and Pokemon Legends ZA. We're back to Kalos in the newest title from Game Freak, Pokemon Legends ZA. But I'm not alone, as venturing into Poke France with me is a special guest. So guest, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Joshua, or you can call me JT if you like. I'm from Australia, and I produce the Nintendo Maniacs podcast, which is a safe place, I feel, to foster your Nintendo obsession. Each episode, I get a special guest on who I interview and explore why they love Nintendo and the amazing creative ways they show that love. And together, we cover the latest releases, news, and have some fun with games like line rankings and listener questions. Mono, thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you so much for joining me. I was on your show recently, so I'm very happy to have you back on my show. And before we get into Pokemon, I gotta know, is Australia a Z country or a Z country?
We are Z, so we're always so different when it comes to pronunciations of things. And yes, I call it ZA though, because everything I listen to media-wise calls it that.
Actually, in Japan, they say Zetto, Z-E-T-T-O. So it is Pokemon Legends Zetto A. So honestly, you can just call it whatever you want. All languages and Z variations are welcome here. Now, before we dive into our thoughts on the game, let's get into a bit of backstory. Pokemon Day, February 27th, 2024, the final trailer during the Pokemon Presents was not a new generation, not a remake of Unova, and nothing from Johto, which was heavily rumored, but a brand new Pokemon game set in the world of Pokemon XY called Pokemon Legends ZA. What was your reaction to seeing that this was going to be the next Pokemon game?
I was really excited. I think, like many other people, we had X and Y and we're expecting Z or Z, and it just never came. We got a next generation of Pokemon games instead, which was awesome and really cool to see. But I think a lot of people were thinking, I wanted that Z storyline because I don't know about you, Mono, but I found the X and Y story really fascinating and really interesting, especially with AZ and what he does to try and bring back a Pokemon he loves. I wanted some closure from that. So getting that announcement meant, okay, I'm going to see a bit more of that story, but also the Legends series is so cool, and Arceus was an amazing title we got on the Switch, just a reimagined way to play Pokemon, and so more of that was definitely something I was really excited for. So it's been a long wait, but yeah, we're finally here playing it now, so it's been awesome.
Yeah, I was very surprised, but also very happy because I do love Pokemon XY, and even on this podcast, I had a special 10th anniversary episode about the game. Because I do feel like despite it being a massive success, it has kind of fallen out of favor for a lot of hardcore Pokemon fans. I think it might just be a case where those who are most negative are the loudest, and everyone secretly loves XY, as they should. It was quite a while before we saw anything from the game, and once it was revealed, we learned that it was very much in the same vein as Legends Arceus, but also with a lot of different ideas and almost a different philosophy about what type of game it is as a whole. And the director is Haruki Tochigi, and this is the first game he's directed, even though he's been with Game Freak since the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire days. The director of Arceus, Iwao, isn't working on this game at all, which is pretty interesting. Although most of the producers are the same, and Shigeru Omori, he's listed as the general director, whatever that means. There is a good mix of new blood and old blood behind the scenes here. So I guess we should get into the game. What's the most surprising thing about Pokemon Legends ZA to you?
Just how much is in this game in terms of how battle-focused it is. Battling's always been a fundamental part of Pokemon games, but it's always been turn-based. But this is really different, and I've had to think a lot more when it comes to like Pokemon battles. I'm just so used to choosing some strong Pokemon, getting the same moves that match their type, so get that same type attack bonus, and I can go through and have some fun doing it that way. But I'm just realizing through this game that, no, I've got to think a bit more because it's all real time. It's got that Xenoblade kind of battling mechanic to it that I've got to move around a lot more. You've got attacks that can hit someone straight away, like a quick attack, and you've got to be right in front of the other Pokemon to do it, or there's some long range ones, and that will dictate when you can attack them. So you've got to have things in the back of your mind and thinking a lot more to sort of work out what you need to do. I think the complexity in the battle has been the thing for me, and I've really enjoyed that actually, a really different way to experience Pokemon.
For me, in terms of surprises, I'll definitely give it to the structure of the game. Even before the game launched, I was a little confused about the gameplay loop. I think on your podcast, we talked about Pokemon Legends EA, and I was like, what are we going to do? I don't know. What is the structure of the game? But then there is an epiphany moment where you realize, okay, the game is balanced between ranking up and then clearing out the mega boss battles, rinse and repeat. What do you think about the structure of the game?
Yeah, very different, like you said. And it is this one hub area, and you get the entire map straight away. The first few hours, it's very hand-holdy, which I think will annoy some people, but it lasts about a couple of hours. And then after that, you get that chance to free roam and explore. But you've always got that home base, you've got the Hotel Z or Z, and you're always going back to it. So I found that I was, it's kind of like you're on holiday for a week in Paris, I felt. Like you're kind of exploring this bit, doing something different. Then you're coming back to your hotel with a bunch of friends with Lighter and Tawny and ZA and the gang, and you're just talking through how your day was or getting those story moments with them. So I kind of actually enjoyed that. It was just like, okay, I'm looking at the map, I'm planning, okay, I need to do this tomorrow now, or it's nighttime now, where's the battle zone kind of thing. So a bit of familiarity and structure from that loop was, like you mentioned, a bit different to other Pokemon games.
I think going back to your biggest surprise, the main standout gameplay element is the new combat system, because for the first time ever, Pokemon has real-time RPG combat. So you talked about that you're thinking a whole lot more. What's your overall take on the combat system?
Yeah, we've seen it in other games, haven't we? I think Xenoblade's a big one for me. And you've got your cooldowns, and then you've got the different move sets. And so you can swap out your moves at any time. TMs used to be one and done, but these days you can reuse them. You can move all your move sets to any slot that you want. And I think for Pokemon, it's quite revolutionary because we've never seen that before. A change from that sort of turn-based, especially in the mainline series anyway. I just found that really refreshing and different. I've tried a little bit of the ZA Royale where you're facing other real people, and I thought I sucked at Pokemon turn-based competitive. I really suck at this, so I need to definitely need to learn a bit more and get some more Pokemon. I need to get more Pokemon in my party that know Mega Evolutions, because if you don't, and you have a Pokemon without Mega Evolution, you're going to lose, and you're not going to have a very fun time. So yeah, exploring that sort of stuff, because even with the Mega Evolutions, some types change once they do Mega Evolve. My Meganium becomes Fairy type, not just Grass type when it Mega Evolves. And so that changes a whole bunch of strengths and weaknesses. And my Ampharos gets a Dragon type when it Mega Evolves, which I think is a really cool extra dynamic. I think there's a bit of people trying to work this out still, and everyone's at the same level, which is cool as well. So I'm hoping, if I sort of level up and practice a bit more, I'm not going to be miles behind, hopefully.
One of the main things about the combat is that I'm not sure exactly what I can affect 100%. For example, the dodging moves mechanic. Sometimes it's very clear, like if you change out a Pokemon right before an attack hits, the enemy Pokemon will miss the attack, which is really cool because it's like, oh, you're kind of juking them out a little bit. But then sometimes if you're like, okay, can I just move over here and walk over here? Will the move hit me? Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it does. And I'm not sure if that's just like a dice roll in the background, or if it's, I don't know, like an Elden Ring-esque precision when it comes to hitboxes. So I'm very curious to see, maybe online. I haven't actually played online yet with anybody. So I'm very curious about how they play, because the pacing is very fast, because you are always throwing out moves, but you also need to think about timing as well. And I think the cooldown mechanic is really interesting, because you do need to think kind of in a different way. You have to reprogram your brain when you're battling. Early on, when I started battling in the game, I used Crunch, and then I wouldn't do anything. And then I realized, oh, I can use another attack right now. I don't need to wait for Crunch to refresh. I can just pick a different attack. At first, it kind of does feel a little button mashing when you just have 4 attack buttons and you're just like, I'm going to cycle through them. But once you kind of get later on into the game and the cooldowns get longer, you understand, okay, I can utilize moves like Protect or Dig to escape for a little bit. And that's also the same in the turn-based game, but it feels a bit more dynamic that you see, okay, if you dig and then somebody attacks, you really see that attack missed, as opposed to back in the day, it was just a text message.
That's right.
So those parts of things is really interesting and really dynamic. I want to hear, what's your team right now? What Pokemon are you rocking?
Ooh, I chose Chikorita. I never chose Chikorita growing up. I always went Totodile. And I thought this time, no, I want to do grass, because usually I choose grass, and that's never... So I skipped out in Johto. So this has been my chance to get my Chikorita, get my Meganium, and get the Fairy type with the Mega Evolution. I got a Mareep as well. I love Mareep. And then to get Amphorus's Mega Evolution, I was super, super stoked with that. I got a Sableye as well. I think this is one of the less, I don't know, he's just holding a giant rupee, I feel, Sableye. And he's got red eyes and he seems really happy or very possessed by his rupee. It's one of the more subtle Mega Evolutions, but still fun nonetheless. I've had like a rotation for the last 3 because I can't quite work out what I want. I realized I want all 6 of them to have Mega Evolutions. So I've had a Garbodor because I just find that such a meme to have a trash, rubbish Pokemon. They do it really well, I find, in this game, sort of having Pokemon where it would make sense for them to be. And I think you see the rubbish in the alleyways where all the rubbish is and things like that. So I found that really funny. No Mega Evolution. So I think my Garbodor's on the way out, very sorry to say. And so I'm potentially thinking I've got a Heracross, which I loved as a kid and never was really able to access. Maybe I always had the wrong versions of games growing up, but the Legends games have been able to play with Heracross, and he's got a really cool Mega Evolution. And then, I don't know, there's just something about, is it Barbaracle? Yes. He's got one
of the ugliest Pokemon.
He's an ugly Pokemon, but he's just got this sort of a godlike Mega Evolution, which I feel like, oh my God, when I saw it. So it surprised me because it's not my favorite Pokemon, but it's Mega Evolution. I'm like, that's really cool. And so I've kept it in my party for that reason. I've got one more. I think I've got Lucario. Some cool designs from from the X and Y that I liked carrying over here. What are yours?
So my team is all Mega Pokemon. It wasn't like that beforehand, but then one by one, I kind of whittled down the non-Megas and replaced them with the Mega Pokemon. I picked Totodile all the way back in Pokemon Silver. And Soul Silver, I picked Totodile again. He's in the game. I got to pick Totodile again. And then I also have the Heracross. Did you use the trade Heracross from the side quest, or did you catch a Heracross?
I caught one because I like seeing the name of the Pokemon. I don't like the nicknames that these trainers give, and it doesn't let you change it. So I caught a new one and got him into my party.
Early on in the game, there's a side quest where you trade a Pikachu for a Heracross, which is kind of a weird side quest because I think a lot of kids want to keep their Pikachu, but one of the very first side quests is give up your Pikachu that you just caught. But you get a Heracross called Boys, B-O-I-S. And I swear, this is maybe the strongest Pokemon in the history of the series. It can solo Mega whoever, Mega Mewtwo, Mega anybody. He is really absurdly strong. I don't know if they baked him in that way or I got lucky, but he is just a very versatile Pokemon. And I used Heracross a lot. I'm trying to remember if I used him in Arceus. He is one of my favorites, and he's super strong in this game.
Yeah, I love him too.
Also, Gardevoir, which, again, a little bit of cheating, but you do get a free Ralts if you do the mystery gift. It's a fairy type, psychic type, very useful. I've also been I found an Alpha Dratini on a roof somewhere, so I've been using a Dragonite. And another Alpha Pokemon, this is another really under the radar one that I haven't ever used, is Camerupt, which is like the big fire camel. And he has a mega form as well. And another one that's really had his time to shine, Victory Bell, because there's a mega Victory Bell. And I've never used Victory Bell before either. In the game, I guess slight spoilers, you do get to pick from the Kanto starters. And of course, I picked Bulbasaur because he's my favorite. But then I realized he has a very bad nature because for Bulbasaur, you want a good special attack. And he has the bad special attack nature. So I thought, man, this is like kind of a useless Bulbasaur. And so I thought, okay, I'll just stick with my Bellsprout. And then he evolved into Victory Bell. And he is kind of functionally very similar to Bulbasaur because they are both, grass poison types. But it is fun to be like, okay, his Mega Evolution is very crazy looking. And he is more poison focused. So that part is very fun. And so, yes, Feraligatr, Victory Bell, Camerupt, Gardevoir, Dragonite. Oh, Heracross. Okay, so that's all 6.
Yeah.
I do feel like, okay, you should probably take advantage of the Mega Pokemon. You don't have to, but I think later on in the game, especially once normal everyday trainers start popping Mega Pokemon, then you should use a Mega Pokemon in this game. Let's talk about the Mega Pokemon in general for those who don't know. It's an evolution to the third evolution. So you take somebody who was already super powerful, they're even more powerful. But back in the day, it wasn't just a stat boost. It was a mix of maybe 3 different things. It was a stat boost, oftentimes a type change. You mentioned your Meganium became a fairy type. And also, they would give you a new ability. However, abilities are not in this game. So that's an interesting change from past Mega types. You kind of have to dig into, okay, what does my Mega Pokemon do? Because I have a Feraligatr, and he becomes a Water Dragon type. when he Mega Evolves. However, the game doesn't really tell you that. You just kind of have to look in the Pokedex and see, okay, he is Water Dragon in the Pokedex. So what do you think about how the Mega Pokemon are used in the game, especially about them not having abilities anymore?
Yeah, I think for some Pokemon that really removes the big advantage that they had. I think Metacam, like its attack doubles from its ability, so it doesn't have that ability anymore, and so they've had to rejig its underlying stats to accommodate that. You got to really pay attention because it adds Mega Evolution adds 100 points of stats across attack, defense, special, and speed, and so it can really change things up. And so, because again, there's new Mega Evolutions now, and it's all new, you got to really do your research and work out what's happening. And yeah, you are right that you got to look out for some of this stuff yourself, unless you do all the side missions, because some of the side missions will tell you these things. They definitely tell you when you take on some of these mega wild Pokemon that you got to take down. Sometimes they'll mention, okay, it's got a new type boost, but you got to pay attention to all of that stuff. And so, yeah, I found it really cool to sort of look through, because I think like yourself, it's meant that I want to look at these Pokemon, see what they look like. I've added some to my party that I haven't expected to before, and that's been really refreshing. And I know with your Mega Victory Bell, because it's the poison type now, I found poison to be really powerful in this game. If you can poison a Pokemon, I think it's around 21 seconds or something until it's guaranteed to faint, unless they swap out or get an antidote. I've seen people use that to their advantage. That can really chip away at a Pokemon and get them to faint. So there's some cool tactical things still, even with the abilities gone.
Yeah, and speaking of the poison types, I use toxic spikes a lot for my Victory Bell, and they throw these spikes on the ground. I really like how the traps are shown in the game. For example, Stealth Rock are like these floating pointy rocks in the air. And you're just like, oh, once you throw a Pokemon in there, they're just summoned into these rocks. And you're like, man, okay, we got to walk out of these rocks because you're taking a lot of damage. But yeah, going back to the Mega Pokemon, yeah, it is interesting. I guess XY was also the same way because, once you Mega Evolve, it's not like a drop-down menu pops up that tells you what just happened. You do kind of dig into, okay, what Pokemon type, what's my ability now? Or what stats went up? It's a little vague in, I guess, both games. But I feel here's even a bit more vague. And again, going back to what you said, they do have to reconfigure the stats a little bit. Because for Mega Venusaur, his ability was Thick Fat, which meant that ice attacks and fire attacks were not super effective against it, which is a big deal if you're a grass Pokemon.
Yep.
However, that ability is gone now, so what do? They really just have to kind of boost up Venusaur's kind of defensive stats to make it feel like, even though it's still super effective, it's not as devastating as before. And also, maybe the best Mega Pokemon, Mega Starmie. They have a really interesting stat change where, okay, it becomes a much more physical attacker because Starmie is a very iconic special attack Pokemon. You put Psychic on it, you put Surf, you put Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, and it will go to town. But its Mega form is a lot more combat focused. So you can kind of make Starmie focus solely on physical attacks as opposed to special attacks. So that's what's really fun about the differences between the Mega Pokemon and the normal Pokemon. But I got to hear your opinion about Mega Starmie.
Oh, it's a meme, isn't it? Like the longer legs, but I've seen some clips of it running towards someone, and it's really scary, actually. I don't know. I've just kind of like, it sort of freaks me out in a weird way looking at Mega Starmie now with legs and it can run. It's pretty funny. It's not going to be in my 6, but I'm going to laugh from afar as other trainers have it in theirs.
Yeah, a lot of the Megas were leaked beforehand, and everyone thought, like, this is such a bad idea for a Mega Evolution. What are they doing? Because, Mega Evolutions, they're so bombastic and gaudy. This one, it just gets longer legs. That's so dumb. But once you see it in action, it's amazing. And it is, I would say, it's what has taken the internet by storm, especially in Japan. There are so many amazing art and videos of Mega Starmie. So it goes to show you that they know what they're doing when it comes to Pokemon designs. You can criticize Game Freak about a lot of things, but Pokemon designs, they know what they're doing. Mega Starmie is proof of that. So yeah, a little bit about combat. It does have a lot of really interesting ideas about positioning, about timing, because you do have to think about, okay, this attack is more powerful, but the cooldown is longer. So actually, I'm going to keep this weaker but shorter cooldown attack. And something that I've never really thought about before. In the Pokemon games, you do have to think about accuracy. But I feel like you do have to think about, okay, is it worth sacrificing that 3 seconds? Because your Pokemon can die pretty quickly. And because it is very fast-paced, you're constantly changing out Pokemon. Another good thing about the combat system is that I'm using items. I actually have to use potions. I actually have to attach berries and things to Pokemon because they will die. The combat system is just really interesting, even though it could be maybe fleshed out a bit more or polished a bit more. But it's an interesting take on the combat system. So
it's not even like the cooldown, though. It's like the casting time as well. Because I found some moves, you press it to do it, and it will take a few extra seconds to actually cast on top of the sometimes really long cooldown. Like Solar Beam's got like 10, 12-second cooldown, but then you do Solar Beam, there's another 3 to 4 seconds before it actually happens. And so you kind of like, just get out already, come on and kill this Pokemon. It's also the casting time I've found that's pretty important to the strategy.
Yeah, Hydro Pump is the same. It's like he really charges up to get out that Hydro Pump. It's really awesome to see these huge animations or these huge attacks. All the animations are really cool. They're really effective and they feel really impactful. A lot of people are saying it feels like the anime. So yeah, the combat system is very interesting. I don't know if I would like port it wholesale into quote unquote main Pokemon games, but I think it's a good step in the right direction if they want to go full-blown action combat, even though it's maybe not 100% perfect. The great thing about Legends is that it makes you think in a different way. You have to think about casting time, which you never ever had to think about before. You have to think about positioning a bit more. I want to get into the city, which is the other main element of the game. The main focus is that, okay, it's now real-time combat, but also it takes place in one big city, Lumiose City. What are your thoughts on the city and about how you explore and how it's designed?
I think it's big enough, and I'm still kind of getting lost between things. So there's been a bit of talk about, it's, not as big as some other games, and you're kind of not seeing that variety of nature. It's all cityscape and a bit of a nature park added in between things. But I found that limitation just makes the game feel more cohesive. You're not just running from one random area, then all of a sudden it completely changes, which I found some of the previous Pokemon games did. Haven't been as critical of it as other people have. The gameplay and the loop's kind of been the thing that's really drawn me in, which is always the main thing, and I've really enjoyed that factor of it. So, yeah, I haven't felt the restriction and frustration that maybe a few other people have online anyway.
Yeah, in X and Y Lumiose City, it was an interesting idea for Pokemon where you do have a central hub, and it was a larger city with sections of the city that you had to explore. And yeah, the city does look kind of the same. What's the difference between the green part of the city and the red part of the city? Not a lot, to be honest. No. It looks pretty much the same. I kind of feel like they should have maybe theme parked it up a little bit more, where there are more distinct, maybe not biomes, but distinct sections of the city. For example, a game I played earlier this year, also on Switch 2, Cyberpunk 2077. Now, it may be a little bit unfair to compare Cyberpunk 2077 to Pokemon Legends CA, but they both take place in one city. And Cyberpunk is pretty good about, okay, this is like the rich part of the city. This is like the slums. This is like the shopping, or this is kind of like the beach area. But Pokemon Legends CA, it does feel, wherever you are in the city, it feels kind of the same place. Yeah. And there's also the wild areas, which are the section of places where you can catch Pokemon. What are your thoughts on wild areas? Or the wild zones?
Yeah, I was a little afraid at first because when you first start, there's only like 3 or 4, and I'm like, I was hoping there would be more, and thankfully that was the case. I kind of find them a little, because you can catch wild Pokemon outside of these zones, and to me it felt like, what's the point of them in a way? There was moments where it felt like, does this really need to be here? Because you can tell pretty well if a Pokemon is wild or not, because there's a trainer right next to ones owned by them. You can't catch them. It won't let you attempt to throw a Pokeball at them. There's a big cross that appears on your screen. I mean, it plays into the story a bit more with why the wild zones are there and the push and pull of Pokemon and people in terms of a living area and how that should work. It fits into the story over time. Yeah, I kind of wish they did more with them and had maybe more variety of Pokemon at a time, because I found it was pretty quick, each wild zone, to fill up that dex and to tick off all the ones that you could catch in that area, I suppose.
Yeah, the wild zones, some of them are really well integrated into the city. Like, they do look like a natural park that would be in the city. There are some that are kind of shoved in there. There's like a cold area that's cold for no reason. Yes. I don't know why. But there are some cool, like, city-esque areas. There's one that's like an electrical place, or like a, what's it called? Like a power plant. And so, like, Excadrill is there, and there's all these, like, electric Pokemon. So some of the theming is good, but some of them are kind of like, okay, this is where the ice Pokemon live. I do like the cemetery that you just go in there. Maybe a little disrespectful to just walk around a bunch of gravestones and catch Pokemon. I do not want to be buried in a Pokemon cemetery when people can just freely enter and have Pokemon battles. But I do like that we're going into a cemetery, because it's such an interesting idea that, okay, Arceus and ZA, they have completely different philosophies. So they really do kind of, I guess, appeal more to a different aspect of the Pokemon fan base. I'll just say it right now. I do prefer Arceus to ZA. But I've seen people say, oh, ZA is way better than Arceus. And the reason for that is because they focus on just two different things. Arceus is very much about exploration, about catching Pokemon, which really, that's what I really like about Pokemon. Here it's so battle focused. You go into these wild zones. There's less sneaking up on Pokemon and throwing balls or making traps and things like that. You go in there and you're going to engage the Pokemon and battle them and knock them out as fast as you can and catch them. So you have these smaller areas to accommodate that. You don't need these huge areas to explore and find nooks and crannies. You're going in there almost like a battle arena and taking out as many Pokemon as you can. So even though I prefer the Arceus style, I do appreciate that ZA has really gone for a completely different take on Pokemon, which is, it's not going to please everybody, but I do like the ambition. Going back to the city as a whole, I'm trying to think about, you can explore the rooftops. What do you think about the rooftop exploration?
I really liked it. I think it kind of opened up the areas for me a lot more, and I did it in a smart way. The whole city's going through this development phase, and they got scaffolding everywhere while stuff gets upgraded. There's a bit of like a platformy parkour element to it. It's not hard or anything, but it kind of, a little bit of an extra thing to sort of collect items and find your way up on the roofs. I thought it was cool because you're going to find some of the rarer things on roofs and some more flying type Pokemon. Found a lot of alphas up on the roofs, and it was a cool way to see the city from a different angle. Your Rotom phone helps you with a few sort of, you can't fall to your death in this game. Thankfully, the Rotom phone will save you, but also it will give you a bit of a fluttering boost jump. You can use that to jump between buildings. And I found some cool, you sometimes think you can't make that sort of jump, but when you do, you can actually just make it sometimes. And it's cool. You feel like a superhero jumping around, fighting Pokemon and catching them.
Yeah, the rooftop exploration is interesting because it does add a bit more density to the city. One of my main criticisms of the city is that it does look kind of samey, but to its credit, there is a lot of places you can go. There's a lot of alleyways, there's a lot of wild zones, there's a lot of rooftops, even though visually they are pretty similarly, and their design is also I don't want to say cut and paste, but I feel like, they made a big area and they put buildings there. It's not as precise as, say, the open worlds in Tears of the Kingdom or The Legend of Zelda, where every mountain is placed with such care. They want you to look at something. Here it is here's a bunch of buildings. But I do like the rooftop exploration. Is kind of fun because I found my Alpha Dratini up there. So
nice.
If you want a really strong Pokemon, it just might be on the roof. And I really like the weird slingshot jump. I honestly think I've never seen this type of jump in a game before.
So weird, isn't it?
Because you fall and you have to wait a second as you're falling, and then you press A to kind of pull yourself up. You described it as a flutter jump, which is a good explanation. But to me, it feels almost like a slingshot where you go down and then you fling all the way back up. And you kind of have to position yourself as you're falling again.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting platforming tool that I did not expect in Pokemon. And you can use it in some fun ways. I definitely got to some places where I thought, am I supposed to be here? Or is this the way I was supposed to get over here? Which is kind of fun. I never thought I would use that in the game. Later on in the game, there are some, I would describe them as platforming segments, which are weirdly fun, even though they are kind of janky. But I think the jank is kind of part of the fun because you're kind of using the jank to your advantage. I never thought that Pokemon would add a fun jumping mechanic, but it's in this game. What are your thoughts on the story of the characters?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I think because it is in a centralized location, you're kind of getting to know Lyda and Tawny a bit more. I know that Tawny becomes the opposite gender to what you choose, and so that's a pretty standard thing in Pokemon main entry games. But I'm just sort of laughing because it's Naveen's the other one, isn't it? The more sarcastic fashion designer. You kind of see the arcs of these characters over a while, and I had my assumptions about certain characters, and you see why they're that way a bit more. I don't feel like you get that a lot with Pokemon games. You're kind of going from one town to the other, and then you bump into your friend or your main rival. You do a Pokemon battle, and it's the same generic kind of few phrases that get exchanged, and then away you go again. But here there's more to it, and definitely wanting to know more about the AZ side of it all and why he's here, what's going on, that kind of thing. The story cuts deeper than if you really want to look for it and you know what happened in X and Y and you're keen to understand all that sort of stuff outside of the battling. There's a bit of depth here for a Pokemon game that typically doesn't tend to happen.
Yeah, I do like the characters. Team MZ, your squad. They're
Mm.
really fun and interesting. They're always eating this weird croissant curry. I think I would get sick after maybe one night, but they're eating it every night.
That's right.
And yeah, I'm a big fan of XY and the lore of XY and AZ, who I think is one of my favorite Pokemon characters because he is just such a weird character to put into a Pokemon game. So I was so excited to see AZ come back. And there's also some other characters, both returning and new. I like that Mabel, who is the director now of the Pokemon Research Institute. She was a character from Pokemon XY. She's like one of the villains in XY. So it is fun to see her come back in this more heroic role. And yeah, there's all these really fun references to XY, to Kalos in general as well. I guess slight spoilers for a side quest, but there is a side quest where somebody's like, hey, in Kalos, we used to do sky battles. Let's have a sky battle. Oh man. Remember sky battles from Pokemon XY? This weird mechanic that everyone forgot about. It's really cool to see them bring it up again. There's so much love and attention to Kalos and the XY Gen 6 XY generation of Pokemon. Did you meet the streamer Iono?
Yes, I have.
She's very interesting, and I like her a lot more than the streamer in Scarlet and Violet. I would watch Iono stream over the other girl stream for sure.
It was pretty funny, the whole story arc there, that mission with the fans and the quiz. I kind of felt that was Game Freak or the Pokemon Company just sort of having a little tongue-in-cheek go at some of their potential fans or the landscape of people following content creators these days. It was funny, but also at the same time, like, this is sadly the reality sometimes.
I've always thought that once they added phones into Animal Crossing, a line has been crossed. Like, phones are no longer this, separate device from the video game world. Yeah, everyone needs one and needs to use it. And also the character designs, they look great. We haven't really touched on the graphics of it. There's been a lot of discussion about it. But I would say the character models look quite nice. I think these are maybe the best ones yet. Because in Scarlet Violet, they look very doll-like. I guess we need to talk about it. What do you think about the flat buildings?
I mean, they're definitely flat. And,
yes.
There are definitely times where you're outside and it feels just like a bunch of cardboard boxes around you. I found inside the interior, they've done a really good job at decorating, and it looks really nice inside, but when you go outside, the flat texture does look a little not great. But on Switch 2, it's running really well. This is a stable 60 frames per second, and I've never seen a Pokemon game run this well in terms of performance. I think the Switch version's running at a stable 30, which is pretty good for them, but I compared a Switch 2 version to a Switch 1 version, and I'm like, oh man, this is pretty different. I even saw some old footage of Legends Arceus a few years ago, and I'm like, oh man, yeah, I can tell the difference now. It's one of those things you don't know what you could get until you see what it was and you compare against it.
Yeah, the 60 frames per second, it really does add a whole lot. People are at least not complaining about the frame rate in Pokemon for once. So that's done. So we're okay there. And yeah, the buildings, they are flat. Again, I've never thought that a building is flat before in a game, but these are just like almost aggressively flat. It's hard not to notice. And what you said before, inside the hotel, it's like the most elaborately decorated place I've ever seen in a Pokemon game. And I don't know if you've been to the sewers yet, but the sewers are also weirdly highly detailed.
Yes, yeah.
There's a museum you can go into. Have you been to the museum yet?
I have. I've loved that side quest of the Spewters as well. That was cute. I
love the museum. I'm like, man, this is such a cool idea. Another thing, going back to the design of the city, I do wish there were more interior areas because like the sewers and the museum, those look really great and they're a nice change of pace from the city. I think just having more interior areas would give it a bit more life or a distinctness to the city. For example, you pass by a bank at one point. The building looks very different from everything else, but at least so far, for me, I've never entered the bank yet, which is kind of funny. It's like, oh, do you really want to go inside a bank in a Pokemon game? But I don't know, you could do something with it.
I want to see a Gimmighoul in there or something, I
do wish there were a bit more interior areas to really make it feel like if you are going to set it in a city, what can you take advantage of? The open streets, but also the buildings. You can experiment a bit more with that. So I would have liked them to utilize that a bit more. So the museum definitely is one of the highlights of the game for me. I guess overall, what are your thoughts on Pokemon Legends ZA? How do you compare it to Arceus? Or do you prefer Arceus or prefer ZA if you had to pick one?
I don't know if this is recency bias, but I feel like I'm really gelling with Legends ZA here. I really loved Arceus as well. And, I think having this Legend series as, I think it's officially classed as mainline alongside the normal turn-based. I really appreciate just this Legend series experimenting and trying new things. And I think that really complements well against the traditional main series we've had where it's still turn-based, but they've included other things outside of that. So I really hope that continues. Yeah, I think the variety, the battling is really sort of gelling with me because while I enjoyed exploring Arceus, the performance of it got to me at times. Catching the same Pokemon, like having to catch a Pidgey 20 plus times. I can understand some people really enjoy that, but it was the same Pokemon every single time and a lot of, I would call it grinding in a way. You had to grind to get those things ticked off. So that was a big checklist there, which, you know, I think for me that didn't resonate as well. And so I think Legends ZA probably has it for me at the moment. I want more of these games. I can't wait for them to explore other areas. I'd love for them to do a Johto one sometime because I think there'd be so much so much great lore there with Pokemon and, you know, those Johto Silver Gold games talk so much about the history of Pokemon and how it came to be. That would be absolutely beautiful if they went back in time like they did with Arceus and explored that area.
Yeah, my dream game would be like ancient Johto. That's something I would love for them to do. And that seems like, you know, what's the most likely thing to make after Pokemon Legends Arceus? It would probably be that, right? Like you do the same kind of time period, but you go to Johto. But they went like a completely different direction, which, you know, I prefer Arceus because it is really interesting to see what Pokemon fans want from the series, which is kind of a weird conundrum because it does feel like Game Freak cannot please everyone. No matter what they do, right. They cannot please everyone. Because you preferred this one because you preferred the battle system. And I like the exploration and catching Pokemon more. So I would prefer Arceus. So, okay, how are you going to, Mono and Josh, how are you going to make the perfect game for both these people? You can kind of lean one way or the other. So it's hard to catch everybody. Right. But I am having a good time with ZA. It's such an interesting difference from the main games. And there are some things that are just undoubtedly way better than the main games. Like the ability to just switch your Pokemon on the fly and choose who you want to throw out. That needs to be in the main games. Why is that not in Scarlet and Violet? If I could pick one thing to take from the Legends games into the main games, please just have that menu on the bottom where I can just thumb through and then pick my main Pokemon. I like the battle system. Very cool. I love the XY Kalos theming. If you love XY, there's so much fan service here. I'm so glad that the XY heads, which I am one of, we're finally having our day in the sun. I am a little happy they just skipped over Unova because I'm tired of Unova fans bashing XY all the time. I do wish they did just a little bit more with the city, just make it a bit more distinct, because I do feel that Game Freak, they haven't quite 100% figured out how to make an open world game yet, because they just think, okay, well, it's a big area, go. Which that was also like the Scarlet and Violet design philosophy. But no, you do need to be a bit more particular about where you place things. Like in Lumio City, there's just a bunch of junk on the ground all the time, which is fine. But, you know, it does get like, okay, I don't even know what I'm picking up because I'm just going through and there's all these shiny things, all these Pokeballs on the ground. Have things a bit more precise would go a long way. Like, for example, in Zelda, things are placed, even though there is a bunch of random junk everywhere, there's a bit more thought into where they are, which is ironic because in the Legends games, where they place the Pokemon are very particular. Like the Abra is on the roof, hidden away. And you're like, oh, wow, there's an Abra there. I want to sneak up and catch it. The fish Pokemon are in the park, in the stream, building up the atmosphere of the world, of the game. And it really sparks your imagination. So I do wish like the design of the world was like that as well. So I guess before we wrap up, let's talk about a little bit, I guess a post-mortem on Pokemon during the Switch era, which would, I say, maybe the most controversial era of Pokemon games, but also maybe the most successful. They've sold a lot of Pokemon copies. What are your thoughts on Pokemon during the Switch era as a whole?
Ooh, it's been a lot of change, hasn't it? Because we started off with open areas with Sword and Shield, and then we went full on with it with Scarlet and Violet, and maybe they bit off a bit more than they could chew. The fallout from that game was just absolutely huge, but then the sales of that game were absolutely huge as well. And so it's kind of like they can't do no wrong, Game Freak and the Pokemon Company, when it comes to these games, because whatever they make and deliver gets sold and taken up straight away. And so, you know, with the Legends series, we've seen further experimentation with exploration aspects in Arceus and now battle mechanics. And so The variety there's been great. And I think the spin-offs we've had on the Switch as well, we've had a new Pokemon Snap, which I think's an absolutely underrated game. And that is probably one of the best looking, if not the best looking Pokemon game out there.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen, not even like big proper releases, but like Quest, which I spent way too much time playing that and racking up the time on that. I think about Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, which was not, for me, a great a great remake. And so I think there's been a lot of highs and a lot of lows here. Thankfully, we've ended on a bit of a high. I think they're trying to work out a bit more the right pattern going forward. If the Legends game didn't come out, it had been 3 years since Scarlet and Violet were released. Pretty much, there's always been a 3-year development cycle with the mainline games. If we do get a new one next year, that'll be 4 years, and I think will help out the series a lot. I think they're in a big struggle of giving fans as much content and new Pokemon as early as they can, but also trying to weigh that up now with, we need to make a good game, or we want to make a good game. Managing that seems very interesting and tricky for them. So I've enjoyed the variety. There's been a lot to play, that's for sure.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely been a lot of growing pains for Game Freak in the Switch era, because the first Pokemon game was a weird remake. Let's go Pikachu and Eevee.
Yeah.
We got to get the Pokemon Go audience into the console sphere. But now they're really experimenting with how can we utilize the hardware in interesting ways. They had Sword and Shield. It felt like a 3DS game, but they had a big open area to kind of take advantage of. Okay, it's a console game, and now you can explore in this big zone. And then they had Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, a game I am a defender of, but only because I like Diamond and Pearl, those DS games. I at least like that, even though they are these weird, overly faithful remakes. Yeah. Then you had Scarlet and Violet, which also broke a lot of people's brains, because then the performance is becoming like a main talking point in Pokemon, which it really hasn't been before. The graphics were a big talking point for Sword and Shield as well. I've always had the belief that Pokemon games, they kind of have never looked good. Stay with me here, because on the Game Boy, they look actually quite nice because they're very readable. There are some Game Boy games that just look awful and you don't know what's happening. And then even on Game Boy Advance, compare Ruby and Sapphire to, say, something like Golden Sun, or even other 16-bit SNES JRPGs. Like, the graphical fidelity and detail are very different. They're not richly detailed games, even though the Pokemon sprites have always looked amazing. Those have always looked wonderful and beautiful, and so that's what everyone remembers. But even on like the DS, Pokemon didn't really look good on the DS. It was like these weird 2D, 3D mix. And so I've always been like, okay, well, Pokemon kind of never looked good, so it's not a big deal that it doesn't look good. But now that it's moved on to the TV, I think people have a lot more expectations for how it looks. Again, going back to everybody has different ideas about what they want for Pokemon. And when Arceus came out, I thought this is such a breath of fresh air. This is so unique. So I'm interested to see what they do with the Switch to Pokemon games. Are they going to continue to experiment, or have they kind of figured out, okay, we're taking everything from Legends, we're taking everything we learned from the Switch, and now we're finally going to deliver the undisputed masterpiece of Pokemon on the Switch too.
We'll see.
We'll see. So, Pokemon Legends EA, interesting game. Not perfect, but very ambitious. I will give it that. So, we're going to talk about another Game Freak title, Mario and Wario. It was released in the West for the first time ever just a few weeks ago, courtesy of NSO, or Nintendo Classics, as nobody calls it. Have you ever heard of Mario and Wario before Nintendo randomly announced that it was playable right now in the West?
I had heard of it, but I didn't really know what it was. I think like some sort of puzzle game was pretty much my only thing I knew about it. So it was a cool surprise, and not what I kind of forgot that it was potentially something that could come to NSO. So it was a really nice surprise actually when it came up as an announcement.
For me, this was one of my NSO white whales. Easily one of the titles I wanted to try out the most, because as a curiosity, it is very high up there in terms of under the radar Nintendo games, because it sounds almost too ridiculous to be real. First of all, it's a game starring Mario that never came out in the West, and it's mostly controlled by the Super Nintendo mouse, and it's developed by a pre-Pokemon Game Freak, and is directed by Satoshi Tajiri, the father of Pokemon. So all these weird, iconic elements are jammed together in this Japan-only game. Have you ever played some of the pre-Pokemon games?
I have not, no. So I find it really interesting, though, because looking through the list, they did a few different weird things. And then I've looked into like Project Gear in the past because, I was once, why didn't Z come out? And I read about Project Gear and all the things they tried to make in the middle 2010s while they were worried that Nintendo was going to go under and they wanted to diversify outside of not just Pokemon. It's fascinating, isn't it? Because you just associate Pokemon with everything they do. But they were doing things beforehand. They were making games and none of them had the same popularity as Pokemon. And I don't think maybe Drill Dozer's the most well-known non-Pokemon game from Game Freak. I'm not sure. It's definitely not Little Town Hero where they wanted it to be.
Yeah. Now we consider them as the guys who made Pokemon, but they were one of those steady hand developers in the late 80s and early 90s who made games for Nintendo and Sega. And as we see here, Nintendo was very comfortable with letting them use their IPs. A lot of their pre-Pokemon games are actually quite good. I'm a big fan of Yoshi, the puzzle game. It's like a block falling game. It came out on NES and Game Boy, which is ironic because Yoshi started on the Super Nintendo, but they went back and made a Yoshi game for the quote-unquote regular Nintendo. So it's a bit of time traveling there. And yeah, I'm a big fan of that game. My NSO icon is like a baby Yoshi from that NES Yoshi game that was developed by Game Freak. And also Pulseman, which was also recently released via NSO. It came out for the Sega Genesis. It is kind of like a Sonic game. Like imagine if Game Freak made a Sonic game. It's like a superhero Sonic game. And the art is by Ken Sugimori. Anybody, if you're a Pokemon fan, just play this game for like 5 or 10 minutes because the art is exactly like Pokemon. It is Ken Sugimori's Pokemon art style in this completely different game. It's really interesting to look at the art, which is really amazing. Game Freak, they made the Yoshi puzzle game, which was actually quite a big hit for Nintendo. Hiroshi Yamauchi, the president of Nintendo at the time, they wanted them to make another game using the Super Nintendo Super Scope. Have you ever used the Super Scope before?
I have, and I've even used the one available at the Nintendo Museum. Really cool toy. I love the Super Scope. That seems crazy to use the Super Scope for this game. The mouse makes a lot more sense to me anyway.
Yeah, I used a Super Scope at a friend's house, but I do kind of wonder, are we going to get a modern Super Scope like we did with the Virtual Boy? Will they try to sell us a modern Super Scope? I would say at least over 1% chance. People will buy it. So this game, it's kind of the successor to Yoshi. And Satoshi Tajiri thought, we got to make a Super Scope game. The idea he came up with is that let's make a kind of a horror game inspired by Gremlins, like the movie Gremlins with Gizmo. Is Gremlins popular in Australia?
People know about it, but I wouldn't say so. No, not these days anyway.
The idea is that, okay, you're going to explore a building and then you're going to capture the monster by shooting a net at it. Not too different from Pokemon, I guess, conceptually. Yeah. You're catching monsters. But the Super Scope at this time, it wasn't doing very well. So they said, let's not use the Super Scope. And they pivoted away from the original idea and focused on, instead, the SNES mouse, which is, again, similar, quote unquote, pointer controls. So there is some sort of connection there. What's your experience like with the Super Nintendo mouse?
I've never had one. They've always looked so cool in my eyes. It seems like such a cool, weird side of Nintendo's past. Ever since the Switch 2 announced that they were going to have, mouse controls for that, it's kind of like, oh, okay. And my brain immediately thought, okay, we're going to get mouse games for NSO as well. I was looking at Mario Paint. This was one of the first times I saw it from then. And so never used one in real life, but I would love to pick one up next time in Japan, maybe.
This is another thing that I never knew existed until I went to somebody's house. The backstory is that they're making a mouse game, and then Nintendo suggested that they add Mario characters to it, which led to Mario and Wario being featured. However, there is one original character in the game, designed by Ken Sugimori, the artist of Pokemon fame, Wanda the Fairy, the character you actually control. And at this time, Game Freak really wanted to focus on making original characters, which they would succeed greatly at in just a few years. Just hold on, Game Freak. We're going to make a lot of iconic original characters. So I'll give you the honors. After all this backstory and explanation, what kind of game is Mario and Wario?
Yeah, so Wario is really up to no good and flies around, and I feel like it's a massive prank. He's just putting buckets on Mario's head, or whatever character is the main character. There's 3 levels of difficulty here, and so effectively, it's kind of like like you got to move. The character always moves. And you've got to work out where they're going to go and use the mouse to click on blocks or the actual character themselves to change direction. And you pretty much got to get them to Luigi, who's at the end of the course, there to save them. You've got to think, where's the character going to go? Are they going to bounce off a wall here? They're going to fall down, make sure they don't hit an obstacle down below. It can get pretty frenetic later on. I was doing levels with Peach to ease myself in, and then you do Mario after that. It gets pretty tough later on. I really couldn't keep up with the controls. I don't know how you went with it, Mono, but yeah, this is one of those games we're going to have to like really dig some time into to get to all 100 levels and tick them off.
Yeah, the bucket idea, this was from Gunpei Yokoi, who of course,
Yes.
quote unquote, the father of the Game Boy, iconic developer at Nintendo, because he thought it would be more convincing if Mario was blinded in some way, which resulted in him walking in straight lines. We got to think of a reason why Mario is walking straight, why he can't just naturally turn around. So that just goes to show you that like the Nintendo thinking about these weirdly deep ideas that nobody else would think about when you're playing the game, but they have to make an explanation about it. So yeah, this game is like a weird all-star kind of lineup. You've got Satoshi Tajiri of Pokemon fame. You've got Ken Sugimori, who did the art. Junichi Masuda, he did the soundtrack for this game. You've got Gunpei Yokoi is giving ideas about what Mario should do. I think also maybe Miyamoto maybe pitched in. And the reason this game was made is because Yamauchi himself said, make a new Super Scope game. So it's like, this is a weirdly super important game for them. We both played some of it. I think my main takeaway is that the mouse controls are a bit finicky, if I had to explain it, because I've also heard from, experts who know a whole lot about the emulation of NSO. They do say that the mouse emulation is not that great compared to using a real mouse on the Super Nintendo. And so you kind of have all these different layers of, okay, the Super Nintendo mouse on Super Nintendo, not exactly the same as using a mouse that you're using on your computer right now. It's not as accurate, especially in the 90s. It was like a trackpad or trackball type of mouse. And then you're trying to duplicate that through emulation. So you have all these different layers of, okay, we're emulating a 90s mouse on a game console. So it's all these layers deep of kind of nonsense. So it is kind of finicky. Can I spam my clicks, or where do I need to be when I click? Sometimes it feels like it just doesn't work. I don't know if I need to be next to Mario or a certain distance away from Mario. So I think it's one of those things where you need to learn the rules of the game or the software before you know how to actually play it. What about you? Did you think the mouse controls were finicky at all, or were you just clicking away with no problem?
Oh, yeah, I definitely thought they were finicky. It was just the emulation, or was it always this bad back in the day? So it's good to know that it could be better and it might get fixed in a future update for the NSO service. It definitely made it more frustrating. When you got the mouse, the Joy-Con 2 off, definitely put the strap onto it to get the wider base. That will help a bit. Play it on a desk. Don't play this on your legs. Don't play this on a couch. Just get your desk, get a table, set yourself up that way properly, and you're going to maximize your enjoyment. Because, yeah, I think that was definitely the one thing for me. Was I wanted to keep playing, but then it was just, I'm pretty sure I'm moving it the right way it should go, and it feels like it's not quite that one-to-one responsiveness to where I want it to be.
Yeah, I saw some videos of people playing it, and they were clicking up a storm. It looked like it was extremely accurate and very fast. So I wonder, maybe they're playing some sort of weird, like, emulated fixed version. But this is the Super Nintendo version on NSO, which also maybe has some emulation issues. So there will be times when you click and then it doesn't do anything. So be aware of that. It's hard to imagine me going through all 100 levels. I'm kind of enjoying this as a curiosity and enjoying it as something I can finally play, as opposed to, okay, here's a game I want to sit down and complete. But I think the design of the game is actually quite interesting because it is very similar to Mario versus DK in a way, where
it is.
You have all these obstacles and you need to think about timing and positioning and where you're going to direct your character. It is like a weird proto Mario versus DK. Also, great pixel art. All the characters look really nice. And I've really never seen them look like this before on Super Nintendo. It's like these unique, like, pixel art style that's never really been duplicated before.
Yeah, I thought it was a Satellaview game at first, because I've seen a lot of those later on in the SNES's life where I felt like developers knew how to optimize the game. But then I read it was 93 this game came out, and it looks really beautiful. So I think they did a great job with the design of it.
Yeah, and it's using the Super Mario World era. So you see these Super Mario World enemies in the background. And I do like that the game is very freeform in letting you pick the levels. It's not like level 1, level 2, and then if you lose, you're back to level 1. There's 8 worlds you can pick from freely. So if you're struggling with one world, you can just go to a different world. Right out of the gate, there's a lot of levels you can experiment and play with.
So, like, this never came to the West, but this game's entirely in English, isn't it? So it was always in English.
Yes.
So, did you know why it never came to the West? Was there a good reason why it never gone to Australia or the US market?
I just have to think at this time the Super Nintendo mouse was just kind of like on its way out. I think Mario Paint was its big hit. And then after that, they're like, why bother? Or it's not selling well, or the numbers are not meeting the quota. So let's not do the mouse games. There's quite a lot of English games that just never came out in the West. I don't know why they thought, okay, the marketability is not there, or the timing is not there. For example, the Mysterious Murasame Castle, that game is entirely in English. Maybe there is some menu in Japanese, but that's maybe like a day of work that you could easily knock out. And again, there are many games that got their first ever Western release because of NSO.
That's right.
And a lot of these games are kind of iconic or at least important in history. For example, Devil World on NES, it got released for the first time ever. And you might be thinking, okay, what's Devil World? It's the first console game ever directed by Shigeru Miyamoto. It's the first collaboration between Miyamoto, Koji Kondo, and Takashi Tezuka. Their first ever collaboration. They would go on to make a game called Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
If you've never heard of it. This game is super important. Mario and Wario, maybe its impact is not as important. Like, the butterfly effect of Mario and Wario. Maybe it's not there. But it's got this huge all-star cast behind it. It's a very interesting historical curiosity. And it's so great that Nintendo is making it available for us to play for the first time ever. So I just love that NSO is throwing out all these games that you never thought you would play ever again, or you never thought they would ever release, or why would they even bother? But they're like, hey, okay, this game is in English, or there's enough English. Even stuff like Wrecking Crew 98, which has a menu in Japanese, they're just like, hey, let's just put it on there. So I do like these big swings that Nintendo is making for NSO. And so I wanted to ask you, are there any Japan-only Nintendo games that you want on NSO?
You're going to hate me for this. I mean, it's Mother 3 for me.
Yeah.
The holy grail of them all. I mean, you couldn't really just put that one on NSO in the West without translating it and expect people to play
What
that
if they did? What if they just put the Japanese version of Mother 3 on NSO in the West? What would you think? What would be your reaction?
I'd be mad. Yeah, I'd be mad that you've given it to us, but it's a whole monkey paw situation, isn't it? So we finally get it, but technically we really don't because it hasn't been westernized yet. Yeah, I think that's the main one. But you mentioned some really cool other ones with some great significance. I know this isn't quite NSO, but we got Earthbound Beginnings, didn't we, through the Wii U era, and then Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light. That got a localization, and that was a release paid for, limited time window at least. But that did come eventually to the NSO. Oh, no, that hasn't come to the NSO service, has it?
No, not that one.
Hasn't come.
They sold it for 6 months, and they said, see you later.
Yes.
And they never put it on
Earthbound Beginnings
on
is what I'm thinking. So, there is a little bit of history of them doing this kind of stuff and bringing it back. You're completely right. Getting this chance to play these games. You're probably not going to finish all these games, but to test them out and see Nintendo from a different generation. That's the real stuff that I really enjoy when I play these games and dabble in them.
I'm very happy that Nintendo, they're being a bit more ambitious, or the boundary between Japan and America is more blurred than it has been in the past. And they're just like, hey, let's just throw Starfy 3 on American NSO. There's a lot of Japanese here, but just figure it out. You can do it. I guess in terms of Japan-only Nintendo games, I want on Western NSO, because of course there's a Japanese NSO and they can put whatever they want on there. Fire Emblem is the big one, because those are untranslated, but I don't think those will ever come to Western NSO, because they're just going to remake those eventually, because it's such a great untapped well for intelligence systems. Yeah. There's all these Super Nintendo Fire Emblem games that most people have not played that we can sell for $70 in the future. So let's just remake it and sell them later. One that I think they could release is called Kaitekita Mario Brothers. This translates to The Return of Mario Brothers. And this is a kind of a remake of Mario Brothers, the arcade game Mario Brothers on NES. There's Mario Brothers, the arcade game, and they ported that to NES as Mario Brothers. However, they kind of remade it, or remastered it into this new version where the controls are different and the graphics are a little different. So I think this is like, nobody would want this, but you could release this, like this weird middle version of Mario Brothers. I think that could come out. And for me, I would love if they released Metal Slayer Glory on Western NSO, which is like a visual novel. I always say it's the most important video game ever made. Listeners, if you want to know why, I did an episode about Metal Slate of Glory, so just go listen to that episode. But it's a visual novel made by HAL. It's the most beautiful NES game ever made. Since it is a visual novel, you would have to translate it. But I think the gameplay is like 2 hours, maybe max. And I'm like, just translate 2 hours of Japanese dialogue. It would be a really interesting release. So that's my dream release.
That'd be good. What about the
we'll see.
Satellaview Famicom Detective Club game? Would you be keen for that one?
I would love that as well. I want the Satellaview games in terms of like white whales. What do I want on NSO? We got Mario and Wario. That's a big one for me. I would love like the Fire Emblem games, like the Thracia 776 and whatever. Actually, Fire Emblem 4 is on NSO in Japan. So you can play Fire Emblem 4 right now if you want to. But I would love to see the other ones as well. But Satellaview is definitely a big one because those games have just never been released anywhere ever.
Yeah.
BS, The Legend of Zelda, all these other weird versions of games. I would love that. I would love also the N64 DD games on NSO as well. Yeah. I don't know. Satellaview, I'm just wondering, like, they have to be thinking about it because the well of Nintendo games they haven't released yet is getting smaller and smaller every day. So they need to think of something. Yeah. And eventually, they got to Virtual Boy.
I was going to say, we got Virtual Boy. So
I always wanted Virtual Boy, and they brought it back in a big way, albeit in a very weird, unexpected way. But they've used their Virtual Boy card. So now they have to go dig deeper. What's deeper than the Virtual Boy? Satellaview. So
Satellaview, that's right.
Hopefully we see that.
Fingers crossed.
All right, so we covered not one, but 2 Game Freak titles. So you can choose whichever one you want to play. So Josh, thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so Nintendo Maniacs is my podcast. Search it on any platform that you listen to your podcasts. I'm on YouTube. Same handles, Nintendo Maniacs on all the socials. Check it out. You know, it's like Mono's show here. Get a guest on every episode, and who knows where it goes? Who knows what we talk about? But one thing's for sure, it's always there for the love of Nintendo.
Great. And yes, I was on the podcast a few months ago. So you listeners, you can check out my episode as well. Yeah. It's a great podcast. If you're listening to Tokyo Game Life, definitely support other indie Nintendo podcasts like Nintendo Maniacs because Josh, he knows what he's talking about. So I always take great comfort in listening to a Nintendo podcast that is as nerdy as I am. So if you want my equal level of nerdiness, check out Nintendo Maniacs. Highly recommended. I'll put the links in the podcast description, so check it out. So Josh of Nintendo Maniacs, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Today's feature is on a new Pokemon book called Pokecology, Exploring the World of Pokemon Through Behavioral Ecology. At least, that's what the Pokemon Company says is the English name, because there is no English version. This book is currently only available in Japan, where it is called Pokemon Seitai Zukan Pokecology, which translates more to Pokemon Field Guide. And since this is currently a Japan-exclusive thing, hey, might as well cover it on the podcast, right? And I have to imagine it will be available in English one day, because it is just too good to keep locked to one language. It released this past June in Japan and has been a huge hit, selling over 600,000 copies, and it got a lot of overseas press as well because of the absolutely amazing art in the book. And these aren't just little sketches that are spread throughout. The book is nearly 200 pages of full color, full page, beautiful Pokemon art. The basic premise is that it's almost like an illustrated ecology textbook, but for Pokemon. Imagine if the Pokédex was actually informative and went beyond a 2-sentence explanation. But this book doesn't focus on each individual Pokemon, but instead gives an overview of the different types of Pokemon, where and how they live, and about their shared physiology. The backstory for the book is actually way deeper than I could have imagined. The production of the book was overseen by Yoshinari Yonohara, who works for the Pokemon Company. Now, you don't know who that is, and neither did I, but he has a PhD from the University of Tokyo's Graduate School of Agricultural and Life Sciences. Yes, somebody like that works for the Pokemon Company. I looked up a bit more about him, and he joined the Pokemon Company in 2019, and he mostly works on Pokemon Sleep. But he was the driving force for making this book, and it took over 2 years to complete. Part of his research method was compiling a massive document filled with Pokédex facts. Then he went and started to group Pokemon by similarities, like they live in the forest and whatnot. And by the time he was done, the document had over 7,500 entries. I mean, there are 1,000 Pokemon, so that seems very possible. The illustrator is Chihiro Kinoshita, who also works for the Pokemon Company. Now, does she have a PhD? Yes, of course. Also from the University of Tokyo, but for environmental biology. Imagine not only being a fantastic artist, but basically being a scientist. Now, is it a little silly for two PhDs to combine their powers to make a massive book about fake animals? No, it's awesome, in fact. And I can definitely see this inspiring kids to become more interested in real-life ecology and biology. The book is approximately 193 pages and it's broken up into 4 main sections: Pokemon physiology, Pokemon lifestyle, relationships between Pokemon, and how Pokemon move. There's also a brief introduction about the book and an index that serves more as a traditional Pokedex with a short entry on every Pokemon, including the new ones from the Indigo Disc, so yes, it is very up to date. The Pokedex is alphabetical though. Kind of funny how it defaults to the number in the game, but when you gotta make a real deal book, they're like, let's just ignore that. There is a heavy emphasis on the illustrations. There are no long paragraphs to read at all. A typical page is, like if I just open up a random page right now, page 43, Pokemon Lifestyle. On the top is an illustration of Toucanon flying over a Primeape in a jungle. There's a little Pokedex entry note talking about how Toucanon's beak heats up. And then there's some text describing that it uses its heated up beak to attack the Primeape. And some smaller illustrations showing the different heat levels of the beak. And then under that is some art with Pyroar, also describing that its mane also heats up in battle. Then below that is an entry about Charcadet on how it also heats up, along with showing the differences between a normal Charcadet and when it's heated up. Also some fun art showing it eating some berries a Greedent once. And then below that we have a section on Centiskorch talking about how it also heats up, along with an illustration detailing how it attacks a Cubone with its heated up belly. So yes, this page definitely has a theme. It's showcasing Pokemon that, while all very different from each other, have a similar physiological trait, i.e. heating up their bodies. Every illustration, which are all completely original, has a little note explaining it in more detail. Most pages follow that format, where there is some sort of physiological or ecological trait that is explored, and then it showcases the relevant Pokemon with brand new art. So you can see how the genesis of the project, compiling facts about Pokemon and grouping them, created the structure of the book. And many of the elements the book focuses on, you could definitely apply to some real animals as well. While many Pokemon traits are fantastical, you can definitely see it being analogous to real animals in many ways. And we gotta focus on the art for a bit more. Again, nearly 200 pages of completely brand new Pokemon art. This isn't just stock art they slapped into the book. Everything, no matter how small, is completely original. Some pages are almost comic panel-esque compilations of different images, but there are also full-page splashes, and some that are even 2 pages as well. I'm not sure how to describe the actual art style. It is a bit of a blend between the official promo art and the anime. One thing that really sticks out is that there is light shading on the Pokemon. Oftentimes, this light white shading on the edges that make the colors look a bit softer. And in general, we've never seen Pokemon like this before. So many awesome scenes of them moving, eating, fighting, sleeping. Sometimes it gets extremely granular, like a close-up of a Venonat's eye, or the bottom of a Corsola's feet. I really like these step-by-step illustrations showing each part of a Pokemon's movement, like Donphan rolling up. There's also a section dedicated to Pokemon wings with a little explanation about what makes them all different. Again, this is something you'd find in a real textbook, but it's reframed around Pokemon. The best illustration? I mean, there is one of Yanmega lifting up a grown man, which would be terrifying in real life, but it is a funny thing to put in a book. The man does have a dragonfly on his shirt, so maybe he is using Yanmega to fly him somewhere, and Yanmega isn't just attacking a random person. But he does look terrified in the illustration, so maybe it's supposed to be a little ambiguous. There's also one of someone trying to drink a Poltergeist. But I also really like the ones that just show Pokemon interacting in unique ways that you don't often see. Like a Crawdaunt digging up sand only to find a Stunfisk, or how Gorbis uses its tail to attract Finians. That's one of the things I really love about Pokemon Snap. It emphasized the relationship between Pokemon, and you got to see them in their natural habitat. So this book is kind of a much extended version of that now that I think about it. You could definitely base some Pokemon Snap puzzles on the images in this book. Now, I think it would legitimately take hours to describe every little single amazing factoid I learned in this book, but I'll share a few. Did you know that Pupitar moves around by shooting out compressed gas from its body? Like, it can just rocket propel itself. Also, a bunch of Pokemon live under Corsola colonies and use them for protection, like real-life corals. There's also several illustrations of Garchomp flying, and I thought, can he fly? Apparently he could always fly, and you can see a flying Garchomp in Scarlet and Violet and the anime, but to me he was always a land shark. That's why he was so scary. A shark on the land. But a sky shark? And with that base speed? we're done for. Now, since this is a Nintendo podcast, there's often a lot of talk about things being way too expensive, but this is actually surprisingly cheap for its quality. It's 1,430 yen with tax, I believe, so how much is that in US dollars? $10 or so? They could have easily sold this thing for, say, 3,000 yen. The Rosalina picture book is more expensive than this, and that has a ton of reused art. I can only imagine they just hit Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, and then they made a book. But here, everything is completely original art, new information and text. Some Pokedex entries are probably reused, but those serve as launching off points to more detailed explanations. I think they wanted to keep it cheap so as to make it accessible to elementary school students and not just collectors. Maybe it was instantly sold out at launch, but now you can easily walk into any bookstore in Japan and pick it up. And yes, it's also being sold in the Pokemon centers here as well. I think even if you don't speak Japanese, if you've ever been interested in the world of Pokemon, you would have a great time looking through this book. I mean, if this book came out when I was, say, 10 years old, my head would have literally exploded. This would have absolutely been my favorite book, and I would have committed every single fact to memory instead of studying for math. So Pokecology, highly recommended from one Pokemon fan to another. You could import the book, and you won't be disappointed, but I do think that this is absolutely going to be translated into multiple languages sooner than later. I cannot imagine this being Japanese only forever. There is quite a lot to translate, so it might take a while, but this will be in English in 2026. I think I can guarantee that. All right, that's it for the feature, so let's check out the news. On the very first episode of Tokyo Game Life, I covered Animal Crossing New Horizons Happy Home Paradise, the last major content update for that game. Over 100 episodes later, Animal Crossing returns with Animal Crossing New Horizons Nintendo Switch 2 Edition, which is coming out January 15th. It sports 4K resolution, new mouse controls, plus game chat and camera support. The mouse controls are particularly exciting because you can use them for custom designs, so no more having to go square by square. And you can also pick up multiple items at the same time and then drag and drop them into a room. The price for this Switch 2 edition? $5, so quite a departure from the other Switch 2 versions. But that is because the real meat of the update is a free 3.0 update for the base game. And this isn't Switch 2 exclusive either, it's coming to everything. And man, this update is legitimately huge. You can run a hotel with Cap'n now. Rossetti is finally in the game proper and he can help clean up your island, and your storage is also expanded to 9,000 items. The Dream Islands are also greatly expanded, and you can customize an island from scratch with friends online. There's also a huge LEGO collab. Yes, LEGO has dozens of new items. Plus major Nintendo collaborations, including being able to have consoles and old Nintendo toys, along with Splatoon and Zelda items, and themed villagers based on Minoru and Tulin from Tears of the Kingdom, and Deep Cut Sans Big Man from Splatoon 3. Though you can buy a Big Man couch. I gotta say, this is a pretty shocking addition. I think many expected or hoped Animal Crossing would hit in 2026, and well, it sorta is now, I guess. It does seem like a new Animal Crossing game is farther off than many expected. Again, the Switch 2 edition conundrum. Is this taking away dev resources from the next entry? We still don't have a real answer. We haven't had a follow-up yet for a series that got a Switch 2 version. And Switch 2 editions are very much the Wii U port of this console era. I doubt the Animal Crossing team has only been doing this update for the past 5 years though. New Horizons is my most played Switch game, albeit I haven't really touched it in quite a while, but hey, I might as well jump back in January, or maybe a little before that, to do some prep. By the way, January is Animal Crossing, and Tomodachi Life and Pokopia are also slated for spring, so the age of cozy is truly upon us. And Pikmin 4 is getting a Switch 2 edition. Oh wait, no it's not. Instead, it's just a free update in November. It includes difficulty options, a photo mode, and a special decor Pikmin like from Pikmin Bloom. I definitely assumed we would be getting a Switch 2 edition of this game, as it was one of the few big first-party releases to not get any sort of boost from Switch 2 hardware. But instead we got this small, albeit fun update. And going back to my question earlier, so does that mean Pikmin 5 is actually pretty close since they aren't doing a Switch 2 edition? Again, we don't have enough data to parse the exact time span between a Switch 2 edition and then a new entry from that franchise. I love Pikmin 4, but I probably won't be jumping back in for the decor Pikmin. But hey, play Pikmin 4 if you haven't already. Mr. Donut has yet another Pokemon collab here in Japan, this time featuring Fungus, which is a pretty deep cut, but they are highlighting its mimic gimmick, as it looks like a normal Pokeball donut on the top, but it indeed has a fungus body on the bottom.
The Diglett Donut last year was extremely popular, and I don't think this will reach those heights, but I do appreciate them focusing on some newer Pokemon. The Fungus Mimic gimmick, it was a great way to take advantage of the better visual fidelity on the DS, but Voltorb will always be my favorite Pokemimic. The Kirby Air Riders Direct, the second one. I mean, I won't do a second-by-second breakdown, but if anyone was on the fence about the game, I felt Sakurai did a great job in saying why you should leap off that fence, preferably landing in the buying Kirby Air Riders area. I gotta admit, I was a little skeptical after the first Direct. I was wondering if there would be enough content in the game, something the first game really lacked. But we got a lot of new modes, completely different racing styles, a lot of in-game challenges, a huge variety in terms of character and machine combos, a single-player mode, and an incredibly deep customization system, which was one of the most exciting things from the Direct. Once they started showing off how you can customize your machines, I just thought, man, why is this not in Mario Kart World? Sakurai absolutely played Forza. I don't know if any of the Mario Kart devs can say that. Other highlights, obviously, Rick is back. The roster isn't as huge as Mario Kart World, so we didn't get everyone under the sun becoming a racer. It was definitely a lot more selective than I imagined, but I am glad that Rick got in. Then again, out of all the animal buddies, he is the most obvious. Sorry, Nago. Lololo and Lalala are great obscure inclusions as well. We also saw that riders will have different color options, so maybe, just maybe, we might get a pick variant of Rick. He will need the bow though. I don't want just a pink coloration. You need the bow. Meta Knight has a Galactonite costume, so it's not impossible. Some people have speculated that there is indeed a few more racers based on the character select screen, so are they hiding some really heavy hitters? Is Samus of Kirby Dream Land 3 fame in Air Riders? I'll give it above a 1% chance. I mean, the timing is perfect, right? With Prime coming out. But I am hyped for Kirby Air Riders. On the content front, if you just do a little bit of everything, that will eat up some hours. It doesn't seem like a game where you race 2 or 3 times and then you feel like you've done everything. $70 for a sequel to Kirby's Air Ride does seem a little crazy on paper, but hey, the age of sub-$70 games is gone for the most part. These games are just not going to have extra content compared to their $60 brethren. We gotta cut $10 out of our lives somehow from now on. I do think the pricing really hurts now that we are in a voucherless world. 2 full-price Nintendo games at 9,980 yen was truly an absurd deal. You would often be saving up to 4,000 yen in some cases. I am really hoping they bring it back eventually because it really did make some games that I wasn't really hyped about. The voucher system turned them into instant buys because of the lower pricing. To me, there is a big difference between paying 5,000 yen for Mario Tennis and paying up to 7,500 yen for Mario Tennis. But at least for now, I am convinced that Kirby Air Riders will be worth the money. After the Kirby Direct, I don't know if that magically lowered the force field or something for other devs, but there were a lot of other game announcements. Assassin's Creed Shadows is coming December 2nd. System Shock Remake is coming this year. Factorio is getting a Switch 2 edition. Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition is coming in 2026. So yes, we are still in old port territory with a lot of third-party releases. But I am excited for Shadows, and that is a 2025 game, so a bit fresher than Fallout 4. Ubisoft gained a lot of trust with their amazing Star Wars Outlaws port, and Shadows looks just as good. I still haven't beaten Outlaws though, and I think if you played Outlaws and Shadows, 2 massive Ubisoft-style open-world games back-to-back, your brain might melt. I will try my best though. And new on NSO, Luigi's Mansion is now out to celebrate Halloween. This is perhaps the most obvious NSO release ever. You added a new console to NSO, it's Halloween, come on. I played a little bit of it, I got up to the baby, but to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Luigi's Mansion 1, but I did enjoy Luigi's Mansion 2 and I love Luigi's Mansion 3. So maybe with my newfound appreciation for the series, I will enjoy one more. I am a bit surprised we never got a Hagi port of Luigi's Mansion 1 like we did with Pikmin 1 and 2. I thought those were going to be the new calendar gap filler, these $30 up-res ports of GameCube games, but they instead went the NSO route. And am I going to complete Luigi's Mansion 1? I honestly don't know because the games really don't stop, do they? I mean, I dipped into Luigi's Mansion 1, I've got Star Wars Outlaws on the back burner, I am still doing some runs in Hades 2 since I don't have the true ending yet, I'm grinding away in Final Fantasy Tactics. By the time the episode comes out, I will have picked up Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D, Stray Children, 2 games I plan to cover on the podcast in a big way. Then I'm getting Air Riders, then Marvel Cosmic Invasion, and probably Assassin's Creed Shadows and Metroid Prime 4. There's probably some other stuff I'm forgetting. Demon School is on my radar, and Suika Game Planet. Milano's Odd Job Collection comes out in December. There will probably be a few other indies I've never heard of that just drop out of nowhere and then become a sensation. That's just going to happen. Now, this is rude to say, but I am kind of glad that Mina the Hollower and Witchbrook got delayed. Listen, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but how am I supposed to play all these games? I really felt that the first half of the year, I was just tackling my backlog or playing retro games. And then all of a sudden, every new game decided to release in this 6-month span after Switch 2 hit. This is the first time in a long time where I truly feel overwhelmed by just how many games there are. And next spring is going to be even more chaotic. Nintendo already has like 8 games announced for 2026. But at the very least, no shortage of things to talk about on the podcast, so get excited. But for now, that's all. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app. Leave a 5-star review as well, it really helps. This podcast is also available on YouTube, so like and subscribe there as well. I'm on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram. Just search for Tokyo Game Life or find the links in the podcast description. If you like the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends and on social media. The next episode will be on November 16th. See you next time. Matane!